Welcome to this conversation. I'm Nadia Colburn, and I'm going to be talking today with Jillian Pransky, who is a yoga teacher. She's been teaching yoga for over 20 years, and she recently wrote a wonderful book called Deep Listening, a healing practice to calm your body, clear your mind, and open your heart. So I met Jillian at the Narrative Medicine Conference at Kripalu, where Jillian often teaches. And I thought she'd be a great person to talk to in the series of conversations about deep listening, about listening to our bodies and giving us some tools to listen to our bodies, to tune into ourselves for greater healing, and also greater connection to our story and to our true purpose, which you also talk about beautifully in the book. So thanks for having this conversation with me.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
And can you tell us a little bit about your journey to writing this book, and also to your own journey of coming to a place where you realized you needed to slow down and listen in a different way to yourself? You'd been getting all these messages throughout your whole life about what you were supposed to do.
Yeah. I guess maybe I'll use a really broad stroke to start with. And one of the inspirations or the mantras that began to make more and more sense to me as I practiced and got to know myself better was the Chinese proverb. And it is, tension is who we think we should be, and relaxation is who we are. It's actually said a little bit more. Tension is who you think you should be, and relaxation is who you are. And I think that that's a really great sort of header in what I began to learn very deeply. Is I started out from a young time of my life, early childhood, all the way through teenage years, all the way through young adulthood, all the way into my 20s, thinking I should be something specific. I needed to work really hard. I needed to achieve. I needed to qualify. And I was on this role of doing the right things so I could be the right person, so I could be seen in the right light. And I was capable of it, and I was certainly good at it, but it never provided the opportunity for me to be led from deeper inside, from my gut, from what I wanted from myself, from my own interests. I don't think it took me many years to begin to learn, how do I know what I want, not what I think I should do or should be or should go after or should get better at. And so I think that was really very much the process of what yoga brought me through when I'd say the first 10 of my 20 years was really peeling all those layers of between the should and the who, to reveal sort of other voices that I began to really listen to more deeply.
Yeah, and that's hard in our world, to learn to listen to ourselves, because there's so many things that we've been taught we should do. And if we don't stay on this pretty narrow path, we'll fall off, and the consequences will be pretty scary.
Yeah.
And I love that you tell the story in the book of really listening to yourself, feeling like you've come to this place where you can commit to your yoga teaching at a deeper level, and you go in on Friday and resign from your high-powered job. And then instead of celebrating over the weekend, you have this moment of panic and go back into Monday and say, well, maybe I want my job back. And you ended up being a yoga teacher. But there's this fear in listening to ourselves.
Yeah.
Is it really the right thing? What are we missing out on? Will we be able to support ourselves? Will we be able to keep up?
All of that. And I mean, I think what's really important to pause on is that a lot of those shoulds come from both well-meaning people. You know, like when our parents and our teachers encourage us to learn more and to strive more and to get better at things and to know more and to acquire more, whether it's acquire more knowledge or acquire more goods and more money, they're not wishing ill for us. They're wishing well for us. Like, they want the best of our lives, and our belief system that we pass on generation after generation is that we can be better, we can do more, we can get more. And it's so insidious in the way we encourage each other to flourish. And it has some well-meaning at heart, and it also has safety at heart, both in the messages that we receive from our caretakers and those who are trying to grow us, whether, again, it's coaches or teachers or mentors or parents. They believe our well-being is dependent on our ability to take care of ourselves by having a good job, enough money, and the right protection and safety. But that's really tied up in, you have to keep going and get better and do more. And it has to be a job that looks like this, that has insurance that looks like that, that includes a family that looks like this. And it puts us into, like you just used the term, a very narrow path of what it means to be well and safe and succeed. And those aren't bad things, except they don't also make room for what's in my heart, what's in my gut, what am I really good at? Like, what is my gift to bring to the world? What is my skill? What is my passion? What is my joy? Which some people might say, don't confuse that with your job. You know, don't confuse what you love and what you're good at and what you're interested in with making a living. And so we get so many mixed messages about how to package our lives so we stay safe and well and get better. That's one side. The other side is the way we are wired neurologically sort of really helps that construction of that message, because our neurological wiring is safety. We have a lot of ideas about what keeps us safe, and those are wired so that we perpetuate this habitual action, this habitual behavior. And one of the real wirings to stay safe is keep going, don't stop or you won't be okay. And we really believe that we have a threat, like a physical threat, a threat to our well-being, our safety. Someone's going to take our stuff, someone's going to take our job, our money, our house, whatever. If I don't keep working so hard, I'm going to lose what I have. And so we're motivated by fear. So we're motivated by fear, and we're motivated by encouragement of those who love us. And that equation, which is not evil or ill-intended, just winds up really interfering with our ability to feel more whole and feel ourselves. So it's a hard onion to peel.
Right. And it doesn't need to be all or nothing, right?
Yeah.
I think one of the things that's so many people find helpful about going to a yoga class and getting on your mat is that becomes a sacred time where you can practice. And that doesn't mean that if you drop it on the yoga mat, drop your worries, that you won't be able to pick them up, or, oh, I go to my yoga mat, that means I have to quit my job. No, right? So we can practice. We can practice, but we live in this way, it's so all or nothing. We can't even slow down.
Yeah,
or just in a boundaried situation.
Yeah.
And I think you're so good at creating that safety.
Well, I'm going to back up, because you said something that was really interesting, is that it's usually all or nothing. And a lot of times when people do commit to a yoga path or a meditation path, and they really start to feel the impact, and they start to feel passionate about it and interested, it does swing the pendulum to completely the other side. You know, being a yoga teacher for almost 25 years now and having my own practice, I was at risk at some point of like believing the whole world should sort of run by that ideal. It's like almost the runaway vagabond. I should just, live a spiritual life and not be in the world. Mm-hmm. And I had to sort of grapple with that balance as well, sort of swinging the pendulum. But I've seen many, many, many students, what some people say, drink the Kool-Aid or something like that, where they were completely this way and then they believe completely that way is right. And they really disrupt and go through a stage where they, put a lot of vulnerability into what they've built. I've seen relationships blow up and families blow up because we get so confused about, well, which is the right way to be? And if I'm not going to identify this way, I'm going to totally identify that way. And over-identifying with anything will always lead to some sort of disruption. So I've seen that work both ways, and there is that, you know, what I really have found is we're trying to integrate and sustain the ability to be relaxed and open to the rigor of our day-to-day life and the challenge of our day-to-day life and the joy and the celebration of our day-to-day life. We're using the practice to attune more with being present and open and receptive to what's really happening, so we can work our jobs if we need to be in jobs, so we can run our family lives and manage what's difficult about managing a family, and not say run away from anything, still do whatever we need to do to stay safe, but we come from a different place while we're doing it, and we meet our stress differently.
Right. And I think people, because I work with a lot of writers, and we talk a lot about story, and this over-identification with one story or another story.
Yeah.
You know, again, it's all black or all white, and I'm all this or I'm all this. And I think what we're saying is that we can have a story and a practice that's supple enough that it can include a lot of different qualities, and that in fact, we're not grasping on anything. We are really allowing difference in our own lives, so that we can go, and then rest. And then even sometimes go with, be active with the rest inside of us.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful way of describing it. And I think, the summary sentence of that is that the practice is to be able to live in our place where our story is always malleable and always evolving. And really that's what the practice is there, is to help us not get stuck, to help us not over-identify, to help us to help us allow our belief system to be pliable and open and not fixed. And that as long as we're evolving and not fixed on anything, that's the marker of well-being in yoga and Ayurveda. Anything that is fixed will lead to illness, will lead to disease, will lead to destruction. Anything that is fixed is a marker of what is no longer healthy. That the marker of health is change and evolution, just like the seasons. So we're really creating a practice to let our stories constantly go on and constantly evolve and shapeshift. And it doesn't mean that what happened wasn't true. It just means, or real, it just means that we're making room for it to continually evolve and change with the changes of being alive.
Right. You tell some really nice stories in this book that I thought, I like those stories. I might tell them again. So I'm going to just name a few of them. You tell this great Buddhist story of the man who's clutching the rose bush.
Yeah.
And do you want to tell that story?
Sure. I love that story. I'm glad you enjoyed that. So there's a masterful, wise monk walking down the road, and he hears this wailing in the distance. And as he's getting closer, the wailing's getting louder and louder. And as he turns the corner, he sees this gentleman embracing and holding so tightly to a thorn bush. And the master comes over and says, my friend, you can let go of the thorn bush. And the man's like, no, crying. The man's like, the master teachers, let me help you. All you do is take a breath and slowly release one arm and then the other and step away. And the gentleman calmed himself and began to release his arms and began to feel free of the thorn bush and steps away. And all of a sudden his shoulders drop and his face lights up and he becomes relieved with this wave of ease and joy. And then he turns around to look at the master teacher and squints his eyes and says, wait a minute. You can't have it. It's my thorn bush, and wraps himself around it anew.
Yeah, that's kind of what it's like with our stories. I think in writing them down, in understanding them, we disentangle ourselves from them. If we ignore them, we're going to stay wrapped up in it. And we can, we all have those thorny situations where we have to kind of extricate ourselves carefully with mindfulness.
Yeah.
But then sometimes we're so attached to it that even when we're disattached, we go back to it.
Yes.
So how can we have that evolution that we can see it well enough to honor it and let it go, and then continue on to the whatever's next for us in our lives?
Well, for one, we're dealing with a nervous system that doesn't easily unwind, ungrip. And so we're designed, if we think like maybe he's holding the thorn bush because it's a way of controlling and identifying who he is. And if we're going to ask the nervous system to go into a place that might feel like a free fall, or like, oh my God, what happens if I let go of who I think I am? We're going to go into a state of anxiety or panic, or, well, then I'm not, even the pain, even though the burden is easier to carry than the unknowingness of, I don't know what's going to happen. And so we cling to the knowingness, whether it's pain or burden or limitation, because it keeps us in the know. And it's very difficult for us to get comfortable in the state of unknowing. So that's one big piece of it. The other is, I've come to believe through my practice that we're not really letting go of the thorn bush and making it go away. We're learning to live in the space with the thorn bush and not continually go to grip it and hold on, or to recognize when we're gripping it and step back from it. So we're learning to live in the terrain with our thorn bush next to our rose blooms. Both are there. And how can we neither try to keep the rose in bloom and keep it in its a perfumed state forever? How do we not put the freeze spray on it so it doesn't lose its exact beauty? And how do we not, overgrip the thorn? So rather than eliminating anything, we're learning to live and recognize that that's in our space and that we have the impulse to gravitate towards either. And through a relaxation practice, through getting grounded in our body, and through breathing and clearing our mind, we become more familiar with when we are engaged in gripping or trying so hard to keep everything beautiful and perfect. And it's not that either are wrong, but if we recognize when we're doing it, we can step back and make room to appreciate that they're there and not be fixated, which would keep us from evolving on either one.
Right. And that's where the yoga practice comes in, because that's what gives us the tools and the practice so that we can assure and retrain our nervous system that it's okay. We can have the flowers and let go of the thorns, and that, the relationship is more complex again than that all or nothing.
That's right. And then when we stay in that little bit more of a middle road place where we can appreciate that both exist simultaneously and that we tend to fixate on one or the other. When we are in the place where we're comfortable not knowing, how things are going to go. When we are not comfortable knowing how things are going to go, we go to either the flower or the bush. We go to try to make our lives better with something and only see the good, or we go to grip the bad. So the yoga practice is getting comfortable with not knowing what the next present moment will bring, with not knowing how our story will evolve. And we do that through being in the body and relating to support. Like literally, I'm sitting on a chair right now. I could be like this and barely on my chair and not knowing what your next question is going to be. Or I could sit down on my chair and drop my shoulders and listen to my breath and watch your cues and watch your face and not know what the next question is going to be, and just trust that if I'm relaxed in my body, I'll be able to meet you in this moment with presence and information that's going to bubble up when I need it, rather than I need to control what you're going to ask and here's going to be my answer and this is how it's going to go, which is how we live. Just using this conversation. And it's even how we address our old lives, meaning if I'm writing or journaling or telling a story about my relationship, my past relationship with my dad, I'm writing it often from exactly how I know it to have gone, rather than also handling that same writing like this conversation, a little more organic, being even surprised by the wisdom that comes through my hand and out my pen, or through my fingers and out my keyboard. Sometimes not knowing what we're going to write, our story is told back to us as we're writing it in a new way than how we plan to tell it.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to go there also. Just that it's in our writing, we also so often go from that place of control and go from, the left brain, and that the yoga practices and the meditation mindful practices can give us that expanse, that ability to relax. And then we have so much more access to our creativity, to our capacity to be available, to notice change, to allow for change, to allow for surprise and exciting words to come on the page. And so much more life really comes from that place of relaxation, even though, going back to our conversation, we're told if you relax, you're going to lose it all. You have to go, go, go. That's how you get it. And paradoxically, often it's when we relax that a lot more actually comes to us, and we're available to listen to what we have to offer.
Bingo. I mean, that's the summary. Life is spontaneous. Life is spontaneous change, moment to moment. It is never fixed. It is never stuck. It's this bubbling, spontaneous, unpredictable flow of the next moment rising. And just exactly as you said, if we are going after it and controlling it and expecting it, we might get a lot done, but we're not going to create the conditions for us to relate to it in its changing nature, and then therefore be alive with it in a way that we're co-creating. And I love that you said surprising ourselves. I think a lot of what we fall in love with initially in creativity is we're as surprised at the creation as it's happening. We don't know that we were going to create that. And then we start to finesse it and be very skillful with it. But there's this beautiful oscillation between being really skillful and being a channel. And in order to be a channel and then sort of sculpt the art, and then be a channel and sculpt the art, we must come back over and over again to relaxation practices.
Yeah. And I want to just maybe wrap up with one more story, which when I first met you the first year at Kripalu, you led us through a meditation when we were on our mat. And I hadn't heard this particular metaphor used before. It's the salt metaphor of the salt in either a little teacup or in the ocean, and how it gets diffused. And I thought, so many of us have really painful stories. And then when we go to write, we have those painful stories, and we feel like we're just in this little teacup with our painful story, and it defines us, and it gets more painful because we're in this concentrated solution. And for me, I'll let you again tell this salt metaphor, which I find really helpful for living and also for writing, for figuring out not only how to work with the excitement of creativity, but also with some of the more challenging stories that we have to tell. So you want to just share that salt?
Sure. So I use this metaphor usually to discuss how we identify with what is painful and how we hold on to, and how it seems to sort of consume us. And so, for instance, whether it's a painful memory or a relationship, whatever you might play over and over again, it is, if you can imagine, a tablespoon of salt and a little shot glass. And if you took a tablespoon of salt and you put it in this shot glass, you'd have a particular salty solution. But if you took the same tablespoon of salt and you put it in, say, a cup versus a little shot glass, you'd have a different salty solution. And if you took a bucket and you put the same tablespoon of salt in, you'd have same amount of salt. The salt never changes, but the container can get bigger and bigger, to a bucket, to a bathtub, to a lake, and so on. So the salt represents our attachment to our particular story or pain or idea. So my childhood story was how I wasn't seen or understood or loved by my dad. That being my salt, instead of over focusing on it or not being able to, or what some people say, you need to let go of that. You need to get rid of that. Well, clearly I'm not going to get rid of something that is so intertwined with every cell of my experience, of my development stages and my young adulthood. Most of the things we can't just let go of. They don't poof and disappear. And I think the language of letting go can get very confusing in that way. We think, this is a bad part of me. I'm obsessed with how this didn't go well. I'm obsessed with how I'm hurt this way. I'm obsessed with how I was wronged in this way, but I need to let it go and move on. I need to let go of my attachment to feeling hurt. And that language sets us up to feel like me feeling hurt is a bad part of me being angry is a bad part of me being sad. I'm going to throw that out. I'm going to let it go. I'm going to focus on this good part of me that's just optimistic or making room for new. And that will just keep, I've come to, in my experience, think that perpetuates our focus on what is difficult. And it's also not true, because that salt is what's difficult. It is our challenge, whether it's sadness or joy, depending on what's challenging for you. That salt will never go away. It's part of us. It's our experience. We came into contact with it. It's real. We've seen it. We felt it. We've heard it. It doesn't ever go away. But as we relax and untangle our arms from the thorn bush, as we make a bigger space, as we calm ourselves and become more malleable and pliable, our container goes from the shot glass where that salt is so piercingly salty to this huge bathtub where, yes, that too, that's what hurts, but it doesn't consume us, nor do we come from that place with the way we look at the world. It's not our lens in which we see through. It's a salt that keeps us compassionate and empathetic towards other people's experiences. It helps us relate to what everybody else is going through. So getting rid of something, also we lose our connection to what it is that makes us human, including it, but being big enough that it doesn't dictate where we're coming from or how we see or hear things. We don't listen from that salty lens anymore. Is really the yoga. We're making bigger and bigger containers. We're opening up our bodies and minds so we can be come from a different place, meet that salt differently.
Yeah. And that's so much of the practice. We're still listening to ourselves, but we're giving ourselves the conditions to have a bigger perspective and to inhabit it in a different way. And part of creating that bigger bathtub is literally these practices that you lead us through in the book, relaxation practices, yoga, asana practices, so that we can inhabit our body and feel it and listen to it and get comfortable in it in a different way.
Yeah.
And through that, have a different relationship to our story and to our emotions and to our capacity to imagine change and to imagine being in the present in a different way. Yes. So beautiful. It's a beautiful practice. Yeah.
If we're unconscious about our salt, then everything we listen for is from the perspective of being salty in that. Everything we see as though it might attack us more. We listen for what might not be so comfortable more. And when we make that bigger container, we make room for change. It is the very ingredients that help us evolve our story.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I'll have a little link where people can find out more about you and about your book. And I often bring together yoga and writing, and you do that also, maybe with a little bit more emphasis on the yoga than I have and a little bit less emphasis on the writing, but it's a nice coupling that you have, that we both do. And so I encourage people to check out your book, try some of the practices, bring these different modalities together and see in your own experience what happens when you tune in to your own listening capacity, to listen to yourself so that you're more available then to listen to others as well.
Thank you. It was really nice to see you here.
Yes, thank you so much. It's really wonderful to see you. So thank you again for this conversation. It's such a pleasure to talk to you.
And I hope I see you this summer at the conference again.
I do too.
Okay. Namaste.
Thank you. Namaste.